Throughout the years, the games industry has given us a never-ending parade of megalomaniacal madmen, heartless multinational conglomerates, and tyrannical pharmaceutical companies that we players have revelled in bringing to their knees. Not all of them can be winners though, and for every handsome Jack or umbrella corporation, there are dozens of bumbling idiots that leave us wondering how they manage to walk and chew gum at the same time, let alone craft myriad evil schemes. For this list, we're calling out the utter oafs of the gaming world that couldn't be trusted to run a bath, let alone any kind of malevolent venture. We're not saying these morons' respective games are bad, far from it. In fact, most of them are actually quite good. We just don't understand how this bunch of numpties have managed to accrue so much power between them. Probably worth mentioning that we will be talking plot points, so a spoiler warning is in effect. With all that said, I'm Ashton from TripleJump, and here are the 10 worst bad guys. Big emphasis on those quotation marks there in gaming. Number 10, Fizco, Sunset Overdrive. As avid video game fans, we're all too familiar with the dangers of rushing a project through its testing stages, with developers frequently churning out subpar titles in order to meet arbitrary deadlines. However, it seems that one company didn't get the memo on the subject. Clearly unfamiliar with the dangers of skipping QA, Sunset Overdrive's central antagonist, Fizco, ends up in quite the pickle when their new energy drink starts turning consumers into violent, boil-covered mutants. Rather than holding their hands up and admitting their snafu, Fizco walls off Sunset City and tells the rest of the world that there's been an outbreak of a virus and the city's been quarantined to prevent further spread. Which is fine as evil plans go, but wholly unnecessary and really quite unsustainable. As we all know from the events of the past couple of years, if there's a widespread epidemic, then people tend to want to know about it. Even if Fizco managed to keep the journalists out, then the government and World Health Organization are likely to investigate, and the truth's going to come straight out. Not only that, but the amount of money they've spent circumnavigating health protocols, orchestrating a cover-up, and deploying legions of robotic soldiers will have far outweighed any profit from rushing the drink out in the first place. 3 out of 10, utterly ridiculous plan, would not recommend. Number 9, 343 Guilty Spark, Halo 3. Arguably, the key to succeeding at anything in life is to play to your strengths. For example, if you're a teeny tiny video game enthusiast, then basketball probably isn't the sport for you. Equally, if your heart is set on villainy but you're lacking in the brawn department, maybe consider non-combative methods for executing your dastardly plans. In the first entry in the Halo franchise, 343 Guilty Spark attempts to enact his plot to fire the Halo installation by manipulating those around him and controlling Sentinels to take down those who get in his way. This makes absolute sense, as he's approximately the size of a beach ball and roughly as capable of withstanding gunfire as one too. Bafflingly, however, upon learning that Master Chief and his allies intend to fire the ring at the end of Halo 3, he seemingly forgets his pint-sized stature and decides that the guns-blazing approach is the best way to solve his issues. Admittedly, he is somewhat backed into a corner and does get one over on Sergeant Avery, but his victory lasts all of around 30 seconds when big lad Master Chief takes him down in about 3 shots. Maybe next time we think before we act. Hey, tough guy. Number 8, Toadman, Mega Man 4. Now here we have a rare example of a villain that's not useless due to their own personal shortcomings, but instead due to those of the developer that allowed their game to be released with a flaw of epic proportions. Set 1 year after the events of the third game in the series, Mega Man 4 sees our titular hero going up against the evil Dr. Cossack, who has unleashed an army of robots on the world hell-bent on global domination. Upon reaching the game's second boss, Toadman, players found that the baddie would sometimes get stuck in an infinite pattern of just jumping around the stage, which wouldn't have been a problem if he weren't so slow and easy to avoid. But the attack can be evaded by simply walking underneath him. Worse than that though, is that simply waiting to shoot Toadman until his invincibility frames wear off, meaning that he'll just stand perfectly still, trying and failing repeatedly to activate his rain flush attack. To be clear, we aren't blaming Toadman himself for this. Unfortunately, Capcom made the mistake of sending Mega Man 4 out into the world with these laughable bugs. Clearly, they forgot to read the memo, extolling the virtues of good QA testing. Number 7, Moreau, Resident Evil Village. Call us old-fashioned, but a good villain should inspire fear, or, and above all else, present some kind of threat. Unlike his brother and sisters, Resident Evil Village Moreau doesn't terrify but rather disgusts us, and as players we're left pitying him more than anything else. A fanatical disciple of Mother Miranda, Moreau was, at some point prior to the events of Resident Evil Village, infected with the Kadu parasite and mutated into the disgusting fish monster we encounter in the game. Trusted with guarding one of the flasks containing Ethan's infant daughter Rose, he doesn't even manage that, leaving it on a windowsill for any random passerby to help themselves to. In fact, it's only Ethan's hubris in addressing the aquatic abomination that alerts him to the fact it's even gone missing. In the ensuing standoff, the mutant's final form poses more of an annoyance than a real danger, pathetically vying for Mother Miranda's attention and flopping around vomiting acid every couple of minutes. Yes, the creature's appearance is stomach-turning, but sadly that's no real qualification for the position of video game villain. So, based on his overall incompetence and inability to carry out even the most basic tasks without adult supervision, if it were up to us, we'd be presenting him with a P45. Number 6. Andros, Star Fox series. It's a widely held belief that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. By that logic then, villain Andros of Star Fox fame should expect a visit from the men in white coats in the not too distant future. Hellbent on ruling the entire Lylat system, Star Fox's primary antagonist and Fox McCloud's arch-nemesis Andros tries time and time again to best everyone's favourite space-travelling Vulpine hero, and yet fails at every turn. Is it down to lack of strength or intellect? Perhaps he doesn't have the funds to acquire the necessary offensive weapons to complete the task. No, it's the fact that every time he comes up against the eponymous mammal, he does the exact same thing, time and time again. In Star Fox 64 and Star Fox Adventures, each time we come up against Andros, he's using almost identical attacks. So as long as McCloud hasn't suffered some sort of unfortunate head injury between games, he simply needs to cast his mind back to the last time he fought the Great Burk and do whatever he did then. We're all for staying true to yourself, but maybe just on this one occasion, change wouldn't be such a bad thing. Number 5. Girahim, Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. There's an old saying that has something to do with pride and how it generally arrives shortly before some kind of fall. Clearly, this advice had never reached the ears of uber poser Girahim, because not only is he a thoroughly incompetent buffoon, but he thinks he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Making his first appearance in 2011's The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, Girahim's objective is to kidnap the titular princess with the intention of using her spirit to resurrect his master. Throughout the game, he faces Link on multiple occasions, first meeting the young hero in the Skyview Temple, though each of their encounters goes roughly the same way. Girahim talks a big game, makes a bunch of empty threats, gets his ass handed to him, then swears to kill Link the next time they meet. Despite being a demon lord with the ability to summon tornadoes against his enemies, he is still bested on several occasions by a literal child. It's not unusual for gaming villains to exhibit a certain level of arrogance, but if your track record of fulfilling your evil goals is as poor as Girahim's, might we suggest picking up a book on humility? Number 4. Palmer, Final Fantasy VII. If there's one thing worse than a useless villain, it's a useless, cowardly villain. Because as hilarious as it is to watch some arrogant wazzock fail time and time again, seeing it happen to a gutless idiot like Final Fantasy VII's Palmer is really just a bit sad. What makes Palmer so utterly detestable is probably the fact that at some point in our lives, we've all come across someone just like him. The sort that weaseled their way up the corporate ladder, not through any sort of aptitude or skill, but by having their nose wedged firmly between the buttocks of upper management. As director of Shinra Electric Power Company's failed space program, Palmer can most often be found drinking tea laced with an obscene amount of sugar and butter, hiding behind bits of furniture from actual competent villains like Sephiroth, or getting hit by a truck. Rather than engaging in traditional evil deeds, Palmer's villainy is more of the everyday sycophantic variety, proving himself to be overly loyal to Shinra and never missing an opportunity to kiss some company president booty. Fortunately for us, however, there are plenty more heavy good vehicles where that first one came from. Number 3. Wheatley, Portal 2. It's probably fair to say that most villains aren't designed to be idiots, but through their incompetent actions and general lack of follow-through, end up being viewed as such by the player. Portal 2's Wheatley, on the other hand, has literally been designed to be a moron. Wheatley begins the game as protagonist Chel's helpful companion, guiding her through the enrichment centre in the hopes that both of them will be able to reach an escape pod and get the heck out of Dodge. Even prior to his switch to antagonist, however, he massively flubs the operation by reactivating the psychotic GLaDOS. His idiocy continues long after he and GLaDOS switch sides, as he neglects the faculty's nuclear reactor because he simply can't resist the urge to continue testing. And despite frequent warnings, he fails to do anything about it. He is so stupid, in fact, that GLaDOS' attempt to overclock his processors by presenting him with a paradox ultimately fails because he's too dumb to even understand what a paradox is. Despite proving to be quite a treacherous villain, we have no qualms about including Wheatley on this list, since he's only any sort of threat due to sheer dumb luck, proving beyond all doubt that you don't need a brain to be dangerous. Number 2, Waluigi, the Mario series. We've not been particularly complimentary about any of the so-called villains on this list, so consider it our atonement when we say that at least they each have their own well-developed personalities, individual goals, and reasons for existing outside of just being evil. Sadly, the same cannot be said for Luigi's arch-nemesis, Waluigi. Created for Mario Tennis so that Wario would have a doubles partner, Waluigi serves no purpose beyond being a sidekick to a fairly legitimate baddie. Even though Wario could be accused of being somewhat derivative as antagonists go, at least he's been afforded a backstory, having been a child that looked up to Mario, but becoming somewhat jaded by the treatment he received from the little Italian plumber. Waluigi doesn't even have that. He's literally just there to make up the numbers. He doesn't even seem to have any kind of character motivation beyond hating Luigi, but as players we'll have to draw our own conclusions as to why that might be, because there's never been any canonical material produced to explain it. In summary, Waluigi is nothing more than a villain for villain's sake, and I'm afraid that will not wash with us, sunshine. And number 1, Team Rocket, Pokemon series. If there's an evil organisation more worthy of topping a list of terrible bad guys than this bunch of cretins, we have yet to come across it. We first meet Team Rocket in the Generation 1 Pokemon games, and it's their goal to steal and exploit Pokemon for profit, and ultimately take over the world. As motivations go, it certainly isn't the worst one we've heard, but whilst the intentions certainly are lofty, boy oh boy do they miss the mark when it comes to execution. Throughout their tenure in the series, Team Rocket fails at almost every endeavour they attempt, whether it's mining and selling Pokemon fossils, evolving Magikarp for profit, or kidnapping Slowpokes. They just can't seem to get anything right. I mean, come on guys, they literally have Slow in their name. How hard could it possibly be? It's worth remembering that Team Rocket isn't just meant to be a band of disorganised grunts. They're ostensibly a mafia-style crime syndicate, and yet time after time their evil plans are thwarted by literal children. I don't think it's unfair to say that if you can't even outsmart a bunch of kids with fancy hamsters, it's time to hand in your villain pass for good.